Now they can invent a sport like golf. Here's my idea for a fucking sport. I knock a ball in a gopher hole.
Oh, you mean like pool?
Fuck off, pool! Not with a straight stick, with a little fucked up stick. I whack the ball that goes in a gopher hole.
Oh, you mean like croquet?
Fuck croquet! I put the hole hundreds of yards away. Oh, fuck out, yeah! It's great fun there. Oh, yeah, that's a great thing.
Oh, like a bowling thing?
Fuck no! Not straight, I put shit in the way. Like trees and bushes and high grass, so you can lose your fucking ball and go whacking away with a fucking tire iron. Whacking away, and each time you miss, you feel like you're gonna have a stroke. Fuck, that's what we'll call it. A stroke, because every time you miss, you feel like you're gonna fucking die. Oh, great. Oh, and here's a bit of part. Oh, fuck, this is brilliant. Right near the end, I'll put a flat piece with a little flag to give you fucking hope. But then I'll put a pool and a sandbox to fuck with your ball again. Ah, you'll be there trashing your ass, jerking away in the sand.
Oh, and you do this one time?
Fuck no! 18 fucking times!
Hello, this is Don.
And this is Gina with Focused Healthy Family. And this is podcast number 141. And we're talking about a stroke of bad luck.
And as you saw in the previews, we talked just a little bit about Robin Williams' idea about stroke and how he put it to Irish golf and how it works. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about real strokes that I actually have had. So there will be times where I will have a few little kind of minor times of needing a little help maybe as we go along here. But anyway, that's where we're at right now, is talking about strokes.
Okay. And so what is a stroke?
Well, I know the stroke I had was the one they called the oh my. You're gonna have to help me on this one. Isotamic?
Oh, not isotamic. I'm I was going to give you the word to read, Don. Ischemic.
Ischemic, okay. Yeah, that's the one where the heart relays information to the stroke area.
Well, let me modify that. So it means there were blood vessels that blocked areas of the brain. Now, where those not blood vessels, blood clots. Wow. It's a difficult day here in the United States. The blood clots go into the brain and block off the neural connections that cause the brain tissue to start dying.
Okay.
So they suspect that your heart attack, so when your heart stopped, that causes the blood to pool and that clots could have formed. And they suspect that your strokes happened from that, either just from that trauma or that you possibly have atrial fib, which they are monitoring you for. And so it went to areas of the brain, and our brain does so many different things, which we'll talk about here today. And so depending on where those clots happened, it affects what areas that of function. Apparently, I'm having a stroke right now. With Don, it affected his language skills for him and his wife. And that's what you call a joint stroke.
A joint stroke.
Or maybe we should just go smoke one. So,
So
a stroke occurs when the blood supply to the brain becomes compromised. So we need blood flowing to our brain. It's how our brain gets oxygen, because otherwise our brain doesn't function. So when a blood clot happens, it's called an ischemic stroke. So Don had a couple of blood clots. There were several that occurred in a few different areas of his brain. The other kind of stroke is a hemorrhagic stroke. So that's when there's a bleed in the brain. And because of that, again, it's just like you get a bruise on your leg and it turns at funny colors. Well, when that happens in your brain, it causes that tissue around it to not be able to function. The brain tissue actually begins to die. And so depending on where it happens in the brain, it affects different areas of your body. And there's a third type of a stroke. Well, these descriptions of types are different than these descriptions, but it doesn't matter. It can occur in different areas of the brain. And so cortical strokes versus subcortical. We won't get into all that detail. So many people have heard of a TIA. So
Well, that's what they call the transient ischemic
ischemic
attack. That's what they're calling that TIA.
Yes,
TIA.
that's what TIA stands for. Transient ischemic attack. What that is one of those blood clots gets lodged in an area of the brain, so you have symptoms, and then it passes. The blood clot moves out, and then the symptoms subside. So it doesn't remain there long enough to cause the tissue death. And so my father had one of these, and it looks like a stroke. One side of his body was weaker than the other. He had a droop in his face. He couldn't speak. He had a hard time responding to us, being alert, moving. We got him to the hospital via 911 because if you're having signs of a stroke, it is so important to call 911, so important to get to the hospital as quickly as possible. Even if you find out it's not a stroke, talk to any medic. It is better to call them and have them come because there's medication that they can give you, certain types of strokes. They can give you a blood clot. It breaks up the blood clots. It's a medication that they can only give, I believe it's within the first 4 hours of having a stroke, that quickly breaks up the clots in the brain. And it's been shown to be very effective, minimizing damage, having a huge impact on recovery. Unfortunately, if you have a heart attack and then a stroke, they can't give you this medication because of the risks of bleeding in the heart. That is too stressful on the heart. And so Don could not get this medication.
So maybe we talk just a little bit about what happened for me so people could understand that.
Sure, Don. Share with us what happened to you. What was it like for you? So
well, the heart attack itself, I mean, you said I was aware when I left, but I really wasn't aware until I'm trying to think of when they were heading me into. I remember what I was heading into now.
What do you remember?
It's pretty vague. Trying to remember when I really can remember waking up. Maybe you can help me in that because
you've told me before that it was in the cath lab.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
You'd been in a cath lab twice before. The first time you have no memory of, but the second time you went in, you remembered. You were coherent, and it was a preventative stent that they put in after the first 2 emergency stents back in 2011. And they don't put you to sleep for that. They keep you awake. They literally go in to your artery via your wrist or your thigh all the way up to the heart and use a balloon to open up the blood vessel and then put a stent, something that holds it open, to allow that blood to flow through there. And because of this, you have to be on antiplatelet medicine, usually for at least 6 months to a year. Sort of your body's mechanism wants to destroy that or cause a problem there. So to reduce the clotting that can occur around it just from the kind of trauma of them going up into the arteries with teeny tiny little tubing to insert that and get that in place. It's really amazing how they can do that.
Yeah.
Without cutting you open. I mean, they're just making a slit in your wrist or your thigh and
It was right down the up.
going into your artery, and going all the way up into the heart. And like they were able to see, in fact, it was really cool. The doctor,
You got to see it?
yeah, he showed me a picture on his phone, of before and after they put the stent in and showed me beforehand how, this artery, it was dark. There wasn't the blood flowing through. And then after they put it in, you could see the little lines where the capillaries that feed the heart then from that, or I might not have the word right, but that they were flowing into the heart. I think capillaries are in your feet and hands.
Well, and then, I got clear from that and put into um
A regular room, a step
a
down
regular room.
room out of the intensive care.
And then the next night
Mhm.
I was I can remember being in the room and everything going fine until I got into the bathroom. And that's when everything kind of started to go really haywire for me, not really knowing what was going on. Um, I thought I thought it was just the fact I had to move my bowels that I thought it was that way. But when I got out, I couldn't figure out where I was or what the room was or what was going on. Um, and that took me because then I had to go into CAT scan and into all those
So
different
I
things.
do you remember me coming into the room?
Kind of, kind of.
So I had left 2 hours to go have dinner, bring my daughter home, and I came back in the room and you were standing in the corner and you were unable to talk to me. And I told you to come sit down on the bed and lay down. Um, and I got a nurse in there right away because I knew what was happening. And luckily you were able to listen and follow my commands. And Um, they ordered the CAT scan first. That's what they do first, but all the CAT scan will show is if there's bleeding. So if there's that hemorrhagic stroke, is there bleeding to the brain? Um, and so that came back pretty quickly, and that was negative. And so then they ordered a stat MRI, and they didn't know how quickly it would happen. We now live in a smaller town, that they weren't sure. This was the evening. This was after 7:30 at night. If they had a radiologist in the building or if they'd have to wait till one could come in. And they all told me they were surprised how quickly they got you down for that MRI.
Was that was the tube, the long tube? Oh, that was really scary. I didn't like that at all. I closed my eyes through the majority of it, which I think kind of kept me sane. But the last couple minutes, they were telling me how my toes were tapping, my fingers were just really wanting to move because I was at the very end of it, and I still had about another 10 minutes to go on it.
And you really couldn't speak, right? You didn't have your words.
No, no, I couldn't. Yeah, it
And,
was not fun at all.
I mean, normally if you're in an MRI, you can talk, but Don's language was impaired. And
Mm,
yeah, I remember them saying afterwards, is he claustrophobic? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I should have warned you about that.
yeah,
Um, I
but
remember telling you though, they're going to put you in a machine and it's going to be, your head's going to be inside this tight area. And I'm pretty sure there's a kind of a loud pulsing noise that
yeah,
happens. And I'm not sure the time frame that you're in there. So from that machine, it's called magnetic resonance imaging. Um, they can see the blood flow in the brain areas. And they were able to see, they told me 3 clot areas. I'm not sure if there were really more. Because they did it so quickly. Um, and therefore, it was causing this ischemia or death of the cells. The area around that was not getting blood flow, and therefore the cells start dying. Um,
I don't know. Because you said that two of the areas seem to have cleared or done something with it because didn't.
I'm not sure what you're saying. Two of the
Well,
areas.
you said there were three areas in my brain that were stuck or part of this, and two of the areas you said you feel like may have cleared.
Don't remember saying that.
Okay.
Um, they showed me, they knew I was an occupational therapist. I always make that very clear when I'm there. Sometimes I have to slow them down a little bit and they start throwing me the medical terminology. But when it comes to a stroke, I understand that far more than a lot of other things. And so they let me read the initial report from the radiologist, um, and the areas of the brain that you had affected. Two were in the frontal area of the brain. And so the frontal part of our brain plays a role in motor skills, executive functioning, speech and language, social skills, are part of what's controlled by the frontal lobe. And the parietal, you had another one in the parietal area. It can affect sensory interpretation, language skills, spatial awareness. So understanding of where your body is in space. And I think one of them was sort of the parietal temporal area. So the frontal lobe is literally the front of your brain. The parietal is kind of back here. The temporal is your temples on the side. And then there's the occipital, the back part of your brain. And the right side of our brain controls the left side of our body as far as motor skills. So someone who has a stroke on the right side can have left-sided weakness, and a left-sided stroke can cause right-sided weakness. So that's just the motor function, the sensory function too. But then you have so many other areas of the brain, like the language skills, executive function, your ability to problem solve, process information, make decisions, all these, these things that we see as our children are getting older. They have to learn these executive function skills, when they're 5 and 7, and that these skills are not fully formed to be able to make these kinds of decisions, process multiple directions at one time, things like that. And so there's an area of the brain, if I can find this so I get it right. What questions do you have, Don?
Well, I was just thinking about the fact of, that I have caught on pretty quickly, but it's like you were just saying, when they're 5 and 6-year-old, they're learning this stuff, and I'm kind of having to learn a lot of this stuff over and over and over again.
So we're retraining your brain to
Yeah.
make neural connections, because neuroplasticity, that means the brain, despite these areas of dead cells, has the ability to rewire and make new connections around those areas. So imagine your electrical system in your house, one area of it goes out, you'd have to rewire it, to have that electricity flow again. Well, our brain has the ability to do that. When I was first out of school, they didn't think it was possible in our later, geriatric years for it to have that ability as well. But it's easier the younger we are. But it still has that ability, no matter our age, to rewire and rebuild. And so what's important is to train that brain. The speech therapist at the hospital told us, naming objects was really difficult for you, and still is, And so if, you picked up a pen and every time, we said, "What is that?" And you said a book, if we let you just say that over and over again, you're forever going to call this a book instead of a pen. And so, finding ways to relearn, really, to remake those connections in the brain. So when we talk about language skills, because that is for the most part, let me back up once. So when you have a stroke, they do what they call the stroke neuro checks. So they're checking your ability, your eyes to track
Yeah.
and move, your coordination. They have you touching your thumb to your nose and to their finger, which you struggled with initially. You would get it, but you were off. um, They check if you can hold your arm, each arm up for 10 seconds, each leg up for 10 seconds. They have you smile, looking for weakness. And then they show you pictures and see if you can identify what these
Yeah,
pictures
those
are,
are
which for the first couple hours you
that
could
was
not.
very difficult. Yes.
They show you words to see if you can read them. There's one area that some of the nurses didn't follow directions. They speak phrases and you're supposed to repeat them back.
How did they do it? I'm trying to remember.
Some of the nurses had you just read it, but
Oh,
then I realized later that, yeah. So having you repeat phrases. And and then well, the reading the sentences, and so we saw literally every hour they did this, how you improved.
hmm
At first, you could say some of the words in the sentences. Um, um, it took longest to identify those pictures. I remember it was a while. By the next morning,
yeah.
though, you were naming most of those pictures. You were reading the sentences with maybe a few errors, and you could repeat back most of the things they said to you. For some reason, the last one things to say back, it was something like baseball glove or something, and you struggled with that one.
Yeah, I don't know what that was because that it almost seemed like it was a little bit. I don't know. There was something weird about that particular phrase together.
Now that wasn't making sense in your
Yeah,
brain.
I don't know.
And again, the brain is so complex with different areas, right? So when you talk about language, there's an area of the brain, it's called Wernicke's, and it's receptive language. So when I talk to you, you have to take that information in and process it to understand what I'm saying. So luckily, this area of the brain was not affected to Don. He could take in information and process. When I found him wandering in the room, I said, Don, come over and sit down on the bed. You could follow those directions. You could understand language that was being said to you. The Then the Broca's area of the brain has to do with expressive language. And this is where Don's been mostly affected by this stroke.
hmm
So the ability to formulate words and speak,
There you go. Yeah, we
to be
can do
able
it.
to engage in conversation. So within a day or two, you were naming objects pretty easily. You could read things pretty easily. That came over time. Yet the conversational speech, right?
Yeah,
The last two podcasts we did, you really didn't say much in them. We did one podcast, goodness, days after you came home from the hospital.
yeah.
And another one, not even a week later, when we interviewed um,
Dr. Tipa Snow.
Teepa Snow. I don't know that she's a doctor. She's an occupational
Oh, yeah, that's
therapist
true.
with a master's degree.
A lot
Teepa
of different
Snow.
stuff.
Um, and you were able to input and to interject a few bits of information. And so now not only speaking, but writing. Don wrote out some
Yeah,
information
I
that
was
he
just
had me read over. And
well, I also had a situation of an interview that I was going to cancel it.
this was just the beginning of this week, right?
It was it was Friday, I
Okay.
think.
So
Anyway,
your heart attack happened on the 18th, the stroke on the 19th. As we record this, it is November 6th. And so what, around the 1st of November, you had this interview.
yeah, and originally I was going to cancel it, but forgot. And the night before I went, oh gosh, and I tried to even go in and cancel it then, and it didn't work. And in a way, um, what I did, it wasn't until 1 o'clock that it was 1 o'clock on Friday. And so from quarter to nine to like 12:30, I sat and wrote out a bunch of different stuff about myself, my life, all of that stuff, and it really helped out a lot. So it's taking, I've done the same thing like you said, when they did those emails that I want to set up to send out. We're working on getting those set up. So yeah, it takes a while, but it I feel pretty confident in myself at this point with it and what I'm doing with it so far anyway.
So by writing the stuff out, it's easier for Don to read things than to come up with conversation on his own without those prompts. So that's that's a compensatory strategy that you're learning and using. You talk about executive function skills. We played a card game a week or so ago. It's a lot like Scrabble. You get cards with letters and each have point values. And the first round, you get 3 cards and you have to make a word. And when you make a word, you go out and the other person has one more turn and you tally points up as you go. The next round, you do 4 cards, etc., up to 10. And making words of at least 2 letters or 2 cards. And I had you do the math calculations. And previously, before the stroke, Don would write down 27 points. And the next round, if he got 25 more, you could add it in your head and just put the next score. And you were struggling. And so I said, how about, write down, plus 25 and then do the math. And even then,
I still got a few.
You had some difficulty, like 6 plus 5. I remember you looking at me going, 12, 13.
Yeah.
And, but by doing it and retraining the brain and me kind of having you look at it again and giving you strategies to figure it out. And so then you had to add the points and we made it through 10 rounds of that game. And I remember, and I only beat you by about 10 points, which Don is really good at word games and typically would beat me. So I won.
So you're
I
doing
won,
good.
but it didn't feel that great about winning. But afterwards, I remember you were tired, right? So exercising that brain, it's fatiguing, as is, you are still recovering from a major heart attack. I have to share that little story about when you were practicing writing things out, you used the word major quite a few times. And I didn't know that the other morning you were talking to somebody and you said, I had a heart attack and you kept using the word major. You were calling your stroke a major. And luckily it really wasn't a major. I mean, a stroke is a big deal, but it wasn't as damaging as it could have been. You didn't have motor skills affected. Even your coordination seems to be fully intact now. Balance can be affected by especially the areas of the brain where you had the stroke. And, we had a great home health physical therapist who came out and had you doing some higher level complex things because looking at you, like you can walk up and down stairs, you might get tired more so than before. But, looking at you, everything looks normal. You're sit to stand, all these different tests that physical therapists use, but they had you walk heel to toe. And that was a little more challenging for you. Although when I tried to do it, I was just as challenged. But what I loved is the physical therapist incorporated cognitive skills while doing these physical activities. And so naming objects, like giving you a category. And so that's challenging that brain even further because that's how we function, right? Don's a speaker. You're up on stage, you're moving around, you're conversing and sharing information and discussing things while you're moving. These are skills, and it's a way to kind of exercise our brain as well as challenge our body to be able to engage in complex activities. And so, you come home from the hospital 6 days after you initially went in and getting home health services, and your insurance pays 100%. And so it's like, bring on the services, have a nurse come out. They were just going to set you up for outpatient speech therapy. And I know how insurance works, and I know there can be co-pays with outpatient therapy services. It is billed differently than home health services, which are billed for Medicare under Medicare Part A. And so we starting with the home health services, and I asked for a nurse, and then the speech therapist came. I said, yeah, sure, send a physical therapist too. And we've asked for a medical social worker who's coming later this week to discuss different resources that are available to us because now Don can't work and my hours of work have been affected through all this. So what resources are out there? I know when you first had your first heart attack, the county we lived in had medication assistance. So we didn't initially qualify for Medicaid, but there was a program that paid 100% of your medications for that time period. And so that was so helpful because it adds up. You're on several new medications, and a lot of them are $3 or $4 copays, but two of them are $47 copays, and so $100+ a month. And those are lower cost. Um, Depending on the insurance plan you have, the coverage of medications, medications are on different tier levels. And so the higher tier, the more expensive they are. And so it's important to look at these things, especially as we're getting older, or if we have family histories that could put us at higher risk at a younger age for things like a stroke and heart attack, or cancer. It's so many different things that can be so, I mean, heart attack and stroke can be so quickly debilitating, right? Some other things can progress much slower, but knowing how important insurance coverage is to get the services paid for that you need. We have still yet to see a hospital bill for that. So back to strokes and what a stroke is and what it looks like. For a lot of people, it can affect motor function. So left side of the brain, right side. It can affect your arm, your leg, but also the muscles of your stomach and back. So your trunk muscles. So holding yourself up. It can also affect your sense of center. And so someone thinks that they're in the middle like this, and they don't understand why they're falling over. And you push them back and they're like, whoa, whoa. And they feel like they're falling. Their sense of where their body is in space can be affected. Their reaction time, their writing reactions, if we trip on something, we gain our balance. We do things to right ourselves, right? A lot of us, we've tripped all the time, but we don't fall to the ground. We catch ourselves. Those are our writing reactions. I experienced writing reactions on Halloween. We were on the front porch, whole family's there. We're having fun, giving out candy to all our trick-or-treaters who come to our nice little neighborhood. And I went to sit on the hammock and it was folded. And I was sitting on the side of it. Everything was fine. I went to put my feet up, forgetting that it wasn't open for me to climb into. I fell backwards. I was holding my laptop. But I somehow held myself forward enough that I landed down on my butt, which better than landing on my head. Hey, cat's eating things. So I utilized some writing reactions. I was like proud that I didn't drop my laptop, but I have a bruise, and am I sore? And it jarred my body. So those writing reactions, and there's so many different little things that we don't think about. Like I was talking about executive function skills and different balance skills.
Well, that's why the nurses kept coming up to me and you're much better than I would ever imagine. They say that a lot of people, they have to learn the alphabet. They have to learn about different parts, different things and I didn't have as much of that.
Yeah, so you quickly, those basic language skills really recovered quickly with you, which, I see this in athletes or people who are very physically active before a stroke, right? Their body can rebound better because they were active, because they were using those muscles. You spoke, you went out and gave speeches and were able to converse. You had a plan with your speech, but you weren't reading, you were just talking kind of off the cuff a lot. And you did that with your work, with connecting with people, with tapping, doing sessions with clients. That was all not scripted. And so this area of your brain was highly active and activated. And I really think that's part of how the recovery is happening. And yet there are other areas. Yeah. And the therapist, so because some people in your shoes would be like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need therapy services. And they would turn them away. And yet they might struggle. And maybe they have a job where they don't have to talk, but they might secretly struggle with things. They might, personality changes can also happen. Showing emotions, our ability to express and experience emotions can be affected in areas of the brain. and so it can affect our personality too. And so, yeah, these therapists come out and they're like, oh, wow, your language skills are really at this end of things.
Yeah.
And yet, do you want your brain to be like that of a, 12-year-old for the rest of your
Yeah.
life? To be able to process complex information, to be able to higher level language skills, things that I can't articulate very well right now. Stress does this to us. Stress affects our ability to function and affects our brain functioning. I've seen this in people who are caregivers for their aging loved one. It affects their health, right? The stress of all this has affected my health. And so, taking care of myself while taking care of you is so important. I hope you have learned a little bit about a stroke today, and we'd love to have you join us on an Ask the OT. I know those were kind of on hiatus for a while, so be on the lookout at focusedhealthyfamily.com and see when we're doing another Ask the OT. Message me, message Don, leave a comment here. Share this with other people you know. Let people know this podcast we're doing, we want to help other people, and be alerted to, we'll put a link, Don, in this podcast to the American Heart Association and the warning signs of a stroke. Someone suddenly, their speech becoming slurred, their mouth suddenly, drooping, confusion, inability to speak, as well as, loss of function. A lot of times people fall when they have a stroke, if it's significant enough, affecting areas of their brain. And again, the importance of seeking that medical attention right away. If you've enjoyed this, let us know. You can view this on YouTube, where we share all our podcasts on our YouTube channel. It's all focused with an ED, healthyfamily.com. You can also listen anywhere you listen to a podcast.
You can also find us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family, Instagram, Focused Healthy Family 1, and YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. And make sure to also check out our website, also the Focused Healthy Family podcast.com. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.